talking about the NLC strike, and we are going to be hoping to get feelers and reports from the different states to see how it is going. But, you know, it has been a tough one for many Nigerians since the present administration removed the subsidy on fuel. Now, this is evident as the effects of the removal is having a ripple effect on every aspect of human life, from food, transportation, health, to social amenities. Now, the organized labor had impressed on the federal government to put in place palliatives to cushion the effect of the removal of the subsidy, in addition to increase in salaries of workers. In August, there was a nationwide protest to press home these demands, and this morning, 52 affiliates of the Nigerian Labour Congress began a two-day warning strike, beginning over unresolved issues around the removal of the petrol subsidy by the federal government, as its other counterparts, the trade union, meet with the federal government. So we'll be talking about this, and we have in the studio Mr. Chukuma Chinye. He's a public affairs analyst, to talk about some of these issues, and we'll be joining also other guests via Zoom to talk about this. We have the General Secretary, Nigerian Labour Congress, Adamawa State Chapter, who is standing by, and also Bartholomew Nyalas. He is joining us from Yola, who is a public affairs analyst. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak this morning, Chukuma.
Thank you.
And our guests who are joining virtual. All right, well, let's start this conversation. We've seen several reactions, of course, to the removal of the fuel subsidy, the decision of the NLC, the meetings that have been held in the past 3 months. But it appears that Labour is losing confidence in, that, engagement with the federal government. Perhaps I should start with the representative of the NLC in this conversation, the General Secretary of the NLC in Adamawa State. If you can hear me, Bartholomew, why do we see kind of seeming disagreement between the NLC and the TUC as regards this? We thought that the TUC and the NLC are together in all these conversations that have been going on.
I just lost that. Didn't get you well. I just lost that.
Okay, so the seeming disagreement, discordant tunes between the NLC and the TUC as regards this warning strike that the NLC is embarking upon. We thought that all along the NLC and the TUC are together in this whole conversation.
Yeah, there is no disagreement in principle. It just is in principle, not actually in practice. The position of the TUC, they feel the warning strike, the 2 days warning strike, might not be necessary, but the eventual turnout, of the total pulling out for the strike in the next 2 weeks, it's all TUC, NLC, civil society organizations are all going to roll it out. TUC feels today and tomorrow might not just be necessary, but NLC, and let's just run and just tell the government that we are all out for truth. So there is no, outright as in fisting disagreement. No.
Oh, but we are seeing the news reports to the contrary. The TUC says, well, it doesn't see the need, like you said, that at the moment, it feels that going on a warning strike is premature. And even in the recent engagements between the federal government and the union, we saw that the NLC was not there, but the TUC was there. And this is not the first time. This is the second time that we've seen TUC go for a meeting with the federal government, and the NLC is not there. So.
Yeah. This is one point where we as, organized labor leaders must agree on one thing. It is the antics of the government to see that they come in with, a divisive tendency where they divide and rule. And when we are not careful, we will not prosecute and drive this process of social dialogue. We're trying to pull the government to come on social dialogue, negotiating table. It might be very difficult, but when we think in divisive, dimensions, it will actually become, dead on arrival approach. I do not know how TUC thinks, but then we all have, one common goal, one common biting decision. But for TUC not always not agreeing with NLC, particularly where Joe Ajaero, who is the lead team of NLC, and also Osifo, not taking cognizance to what happened last time. It was actually discouraging and was uncalled for. But at this point in time, the NLC had its her neck, and TUC also had hers. But we all agree 14 days, there's going to be, an all roll out, ensure that government returns back on the negotiating table, and so that we can have a way forward.
Now, Mr. Yalas, I would like to ask, how do you explain that there's no disconnect between NLC and TUC? To take, for example, now, the last warning protest that was staged, we reached some members of the NLC in other states aside Abuja, the FCT, and some of them, it might be shocking for you to know that some of them were not even aware of the protest. We saw that this protest started coming in later. We started hearing reports from all states mobilizing people. So how do you explain that there's no disconnect between members of NLC in different states of the country?
Yeah, you are right. When there synergy in communication, when there is no a flow of command coming from one commanding front, you are likely going to have what happened last time in ab initio. TUC felt that they were not going to go out on the protest rally. It was on a second thought eventually that came up. I think that in our driving process and in our kinetics approach, there's a variance in it. But eventually, last protest, there was an agreement. But like I said, I think it is just on the issue of not agreeing on timelines and when to do that. It is not actually on the main issue that we are processing and we are driving. So, but all of us in diaspora from different states and state councils, this is all we always drum out at our NEC meetings, that there must be, a connect. There must be a synergy between the leadership of these two centers, such that the variance in driving our process will not bring about, execution. So this is not a general, happening. In generic terms, it happened in just few. Had a robust outing in the last, protest rally we had. This time around again, it is only NLC that is coming at all, and we felt this is the, in the provisor of NLC dynamics, in labor dynamics and kinetics. We always feel that there must always be, a warning what you give out, as an ultimatum. And this is also, while we give the ultimatum, this is just 2 days warning to showcase that we are all going to go all out. But that TUC is not joining us, and has not negate or has not actually, watered down the decision and our preparedness to go on strike come 2 weeks.
Okay, so as of this morning, can you guarantee that all members of the NLC are in sync with the decision to embark on this 2-day warning strike?
But can I shock you, Mensa? Here in Adamawa State, as we speak, I would have gone out. I just drove past streets now. I passed the Bank Road. I passed Galadima Aminu Way. The streets are really very empty. We had our SEC meeting of both TUC and NLC combined yesterday. And it was agreed it's going to be, an all-out, protest today, withdrawal of services in Adamawa State. As I speak to you, before you called me this morning, I woke up very early by 5:30. I've been receiving calls. Would that going to be work today? Should we go to work? Should we stay? I told them it is a warning strike. We have spoken with the governor of the state and the agencies of the government. We are withdrawing services. The labor in Adamawa State, we do not have any feasting with the government of the day. It's a listening government, even at that, to obey the national orders of the organized labor. We have decided both at home here, TUC and NLC are having a sit at home and also withdrawal of services in the state in Adamawa State.
Yeah, but can we say the same for all the other states of the country?
Oh, I wish they do same, because it affects everybody and we must all come together, including you, Daniel. It's all about all that affects us, the common man, the economy, and we must all come out to ensure that we prosecute ourselves by ourselves, because we feel the government is insensitive, government is insincere, and we must come together to pull back government on the social dialogue and on the table of discussion, so that we can have a headway in Nigeria.
So, Mr. Yalas, if all this, you cannot guarantee that all the states are, joining the strike, the warning strike like you purported, then who should we blame the communication gap on? Because if this state is
like I said, I'm not being pessimistic, and I'm not asserting that there's not going to be an all-out robust outing today for NLC. Oh yes, and for TUC, like I told you, in Adamawa State, TUC is all out together. We do things in common here. And I said, I wish other states too, there's no variance, there's no disconnect between these two centers. We all come all out to do same. If it affects one, as our slogan goes, injury to one, injury to all. For the fact that NLC has said there is the need for us to go all out today for a warning strike today and tomorrow, I also feel that as it is in Adamawa State, other centers also will follow queue and follow NLC today and in withdrawing services, and we prosecute these causes together. Yes. So for NLC, I am sure communication is robust, communication is divergent, communication is all over, and taking Adamawa State as a case, there is going to be a very successful withdrawal of services in the next 48 hours.
All right. Let's just hold your thought there. Let's come to the studio now. We have Mr. Chinye here in the studio. Now, what can you make of all of this? You've heard from the representative of the NLC in Adamawa State that all the states, he's very, very optimistic that all the states will partake in this warning strike. Now, as a public affairs analyst, what can you make of all of this, from what we've had before from the NLC and then TUC pulling out at the last minute?
I think the first thing to say is, whilst as important as the TUC is and the NLC is, I think maybe we're focusing too much on that specific organization, the Trade Union Congress. As you can see, there's widespread support for NLCs, for the strike. You have, and it encompasses all facets of public life. You have different unions from even all the way to pilots, engineers, healthcare, banks. Different unions are in support of this. So I think there's too much focus on that little divergence between the TUC and the NLC. And as he rightly said, the actual main, the main strike in 2 weeks, the TUC is in support of that. There is, obviously, you've seen a bit of divergence with NLC's, hesitation to actually go to the table to continue negotiations with Lalong and the Ministry of Labour and the federal government in general. I think maybe the TUC sees, maybe the NLC is tired really of having this continuous back and forth, and see this 2-day strike as a way of saying, look, we're actually very serious about this. We have the capability, to actually shut down this country, the economy of this country. And I don't see that as a bad thing as well. I think it's one of those things where in other countries, strikes can be good things. They're avenues to voice your concerns where dialogue is no longer working. So in general, I think the divergence between NLC and TUC is actually a bit, is maybe overblown out.
So what would you say for the ordinary Nigerian who does not understand all of this as a trade union congress, and or let's say, you know, they look out for the benefit of workers, and then we have this discordant kind of communication, this person is agreeing to this and all that. What do you think the ordinary Nigerians will be thinking at this point, you know, losing confidence and all of that? That has been in the news several times.
There's a few things I think the average Nigerian would think. The first thing is, is that whether there's a strike or not, the average Nigerian is the one who suffers at the end of the day. The average Nigerian is the one who is suffering from the fuel subsidy removal. The average Nigerian ultimately is still going to suffer from, you know, the loss of services for the next 48 hours and ultimately the actual strike in 2 weeks. So I think these trade unions and organizations have that responsibility to, you know, put a united front. That in itself is important for them to feel actually represented and to feel like their interests are what these organizations and trade unions are putting forward to the government, because a lot of these people don't have any other avenue to get their feelings or, you know, their needs known, really. We've seen that the federal government has approved in August, you know, palliatives and packages for each state. But as we saw with the COVID palliatives, there's very little trickle-down effect. It doesn't get to the point where the average Nigerian who maybe, or even who might be on minimum wage or lower, or the average civil servant or whoever, federal worker, actually feels that impact. Mm. So I think there's really that need for these trade unions specifically to put an organized front, because they are the ones who represent the people.
Okay. All right. Okay. Now let's go back to the General Secretary NLC. I hope he's still there. You know,
I'm here. I'm here. Daniel mentioned
the issues that have been raised over time. You know, Mr. Nyalas, there are people who feel that the NLC is being insensitive and it's not being considerate on the government. So, for instance, yesterday we heard the Minister of Labor said, well, this administration is just coming on board and that the NLC should allow it to, you know, consider some of the issues. In fact, he mentioned that he's trying to get the full briefing about what's on ground. As we all know, they were just inaugurated, you know, into the office, and they're just trying to get a hang on what's happening, you know, and all that. So, and again, also, there's been this rollout of palliatives to different states. 5 billion naira was promised to all the 36 states, and we've so far seen the release of 2 billion naira to some of the states, and the distribution of grains and the like. So, isn't that, you know, something to show that government is really concerned about the plight of the people?
Thank you. You see, number one, let me just a quick one. Mr. Minister is a Nigerian, and Mr. Minister should have been prepared, you know, before coming on board. Mr. Minister should have been abreast with issues, contentious issues for that matter in Nigeria, and that coming now to beg for time, it is insensitive, it is inconsiderate. It means that he has to go back and dust the table very well. And he should know that there had been, you know, still subsisting issues. And when he knew that he was coming to, you know, take on the labor windows, and he should have also, you know, sincerely, you know, take some 72 hours, dust through and just put on his thinking cap and see what he could do. Now, Wike came on board, and Wike said, everybody, maybe included, I don't know, Mr. Daniel mentioned your house must go down. So he came with a blueprint of things must go down. It means he knows what he's talking about, things that must stand and things that must go down. Mr. Minister must know what, you know, the government should provide for Nigerians and for the working class of Nigeria. Now we are not insensitive. Who is insensitive here? I think is the government, because government is subsisting, is continuous. In the times, look, in the times of His Excellency Muhammad Buhari, he was also not addressing these issues. These issues, way back in the days of His Excellency, the President Muhammadu Buhari, before Tinubu came on board, we were having meetings with the government.
Okay.
When the same government of APC came on board, it was the same APC government that Labour was discussing with. So it is not a new issue. So rather, it is insensitivity to the government and not taking into cognizance the plight of Nigerians, not only workers now, Nigerians. Okay. The major issue here, my friend Daniel mentioned, it is not on the issue of that palliative is given. In the first place, they said, thank you for even trying to get that. Government said 5 billion naira had been given to all states of the federation, but that is not the truth. That's not the fact. The truth is 2 billion, yes. And I ask you, how much is 2 billion, to state like Kaduna State, state like Adamawa State, state like Lagos State? How much 2 billion naira? Oh, we are asking for, this handout. We are asking for, a realistic and a sustainable, approach, to this, economic, doldrum. We all are saying is, we have spelled them out clearly. And in the last broadcast of His Excellency, His Excellency President Ahmed Tinubu, you could see clearly that there was no plan in the template of palliatives of economic, way out that he rolled out in his speech. Clearly, there was no place again, for the issue that will address, fuel in this country. We have accepted by his speech that we no longer will refine fuel in this country. We have accepted by speech that we will forever be importing fuel. We have accepted by speech that we are open to, marketers to bring in fuel and sell to us at any price they decide to do that. And then it means we have accepted also that our four refineries that are moribund are going to remain dead forever. All we are asking is that let our refineries work. We have, the crude, we have the refineries, and for crying out loud, we've been saying this. You are turning around maintenance on moribund, institution, and we have well over 1,500 workers in all these refineries, and we are paying them. What are we saying? Ms. Daniel mentioned we are not saying that, rolling out of this handouts in Adamawa State.
Okay, can you hear me? If you can hear me. Hello, can you hear me?
Okay, go ahead.
We know that from the reports we are getting, 5 billion naira was agreed to be paid to the states. Yes, and we also know that the first tranche of that 5 billion naira is the 2 billion that has been released to the states. So we are waiting for the remaining 3 billion naira, and some of the governors have actually mentioned that. So Nigerians have kicked, yes, about whether or not these palliatives can go around, whether it's enough, and so on. But in clear terms, can you tell us what is the NLC proposing that the federal government do to deal with this situation?
Yeah, the NLC had proposed a template, and which is why it has been called off, a sine die by the there. Number one, refineries must work. And when we say refineries must work, we must also, set in to ensure that Naira becomes stable. All right. We have also said this so clearly that when these things and when it bounces back, the issue of insecurity will be addressed. These are the issues we are talking about. But domestic issues, as government interferences in labor dynamics. We do in our cases, but where government decides to decide what labor does and how we do it, and as state council, headquarters of unions and this we say we are not acceptable. That is just our domestic issues. But then for the national issues.
Hello, doctor. Can you just listen? This is meant to be a conversation, and I'm wondering if you can really hear me. Now, the point is this: some of the things that you have mentioned about fixing the refinery, stabilizing the exchange rate, security situation in the country, and even as part of the agreements that I've seen in the previous meetings about education and the rest of them, some of these things are long-term issues. We are talking about in the short term. What should the government do in the short term?
Fine. The short-term issue, do you think that, fixing the refineries is a long-term issue? It is not a long-term issue. It is releasing funds. We have the from anywhere. But fine, since those that fix and build the refineries, are expatriates and they know, the keys and the long term, it is short term. We feel that when we have our own fuel refined in our geography, the economy will bounce back. This is just our take number one. Then, of course, look about, the take-home pay of the common man. Take-home pay. Is it a long term? It's no long term. Do we still, believe that we don't have money in this country? And such to a point that, people are indicted that, a quantum of some money, unbelievable numbers that is being, stashed somewhere. And, figures are being called that Mr. A, Mr. B, has stashed or stole so amount. Is get those monies back, and see them back into the economy. Economy will breathe again. Let the economy breathe. This is what we're saying. These are not long-term issues. These are issues that. Okay. Are you telling me too that security is long-term issue? Never, sir. Security is not long-term issue. It's an issue that we must sit up and know we are.
So, Dr. Yalas, one last question before we let you go. I know that you've been talking about issues that have to be tackled before NLC can, agree with the government. Now, when you're on the table, let's just imagine you're on the table with the government now. What short-term goals do you think that the government can just fix, and not everything, before you go back to, this agreement? What are the things that the government can do now? At least you know that the government cannot do everything at once, right? Okay, I think we lost our guest from Adamoa there, the NLC representative. But let me bring the question here. These are short and long-term goals he has mentioned. And as Nigerians now, we do not want a situation where everybody down tools, because like you said, when two elephants fight, it is the grass that will suffer. And in this scenario, it seems we, the ordinary Nigerians, are the ones that will suffer. Yeah. So from all what he has said now, the long and short-term goals, what do you think that the government should do for Nigerians at the moment? And then maybe in some time, we should look at some of the goals and see how we can balance things.
Right. I think one of the first places that we need to actually look at is the fact that some of these long-term goals, because of how long they've been pushed back by different, administrations, there's always going to be growing pains. There's always going to be a point where whoever decided to say, look, okay, we're going to put a stop to subsidies. We're going to, float the naira, all of these things. There was always going to be a point where, because of how neglectful we've been of these policies, government policies, fiscal policies, it's gotten to a point where there was always going to be a negative short-term effect for all people, for most Nigerians involved. Where, again, I think we've mentioned it loads of times, the Tinubu administration has failed, and why we're seeing a lot of these protests coming now is there's no plan in place to mitigate some of these factors. So to answer your question, I think one of the times I was here before, I had a similar question posed when the subsidy first went into place. I think that we have a minimum wage that definitely needs to be increased by maybe 100%. Where that money comes from is a challenge. It's a difficulty. That is for able Minister of Finance, Wale Edun, and the President to figure out. I
mean, we're already seeing the President say he gets frightened.
Exactly.
Receive the workers' payroll.
Exactly. Yeah. But we need, the minimum wage is too low. Even when we look at the informal economy, you see that I think the tax rate itself also needs to be restructured, because you have a situation where people who are even earning less, because of the way the taxes work in this country, they're also getting taxed as much as you have people who are earning the tax brackets. Somebody who is earning as much as more than, let's say, 5 million is paying the same tax as somebody who is on 500,000, for example. That needs to be addressed. We also need to look at alternative ways to generate income, to generate government revenue and increase our GDP. We've seen new interesting portfolios brought into like in the ministerial list. You have blue economy, you have a few digital and tech. Even our agrarian sector, there's a lot of places where we can get government revenue. And in getting government revenue, there also needs to be judicious spend of that revenue, of that money, to be able to say, okay, look, we are because what's one of the things that has left a sour taste in my mouth as working in in CSO and NGOs. When you interrogate with people, I did there's a study I did. I went to Kanu to look at how some governments spent the palliative money that was given. There's so much corruption in this country. They just take the money, and you have local government chairman they're getting palliatives, and they're only giving the palliatives to people that voted for them, right? So you have a situation. Party members, yes. You have a situation where it is, even if you have Tinubu, his heart might be in the right place. You have the state governor whose heart might be in the right place. That trickle down of that money is something that is a problem. You don't have. There's no systems in place to ensure that person A, person B, person C, person D are getting what they need to survive in this country. People are silently suffering.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chukwuma Chinye, who is public affairs analyst from the CDD, I believe. Thank you for joining us on Daybreak this morning.